Okay everyone, this is going to be a quick introduction to this component I've made that sort of allows you to set out camera paths within your TouchDesigner scene. This is something that I showcased in this earlier video for the Gaussian splatting updates that I made, where you can essentially set camera positions. I had a lot of questions about how to use this in other projects, so I've essentially made a more standalone version that you can obviously continue to use with Gaussian splats, but you can also use with any other kind of network that you like. This is the base network of how this might be used. I have a component that's currently in my whip work in progress that I can drag and bring in called camera control. And it's automatically going to connect to a render 1. So if you have a render 1, just make sure that's your output name. We will go into the component in a minute to kind of look through what's actually happening. But I'm going to start out with just the basics of how to use this thing. There's a couple of things that we could do. We could press A to make that viewer active, and we could think of this like a panel where we can actually control things. But because we're not using our mouse space, maybe I'll make an update in the future where we can set positions based on the mouse space, but for now we're not. We're going to make our movements manually, so it's best to start out with everything homed so that we are always going to have something that's going to be the same. We're going to start out with this little visual here so we can see what camera positions we actually have added to the scene, and let's just see what the options we have here are. So we have this camera play/edit. When you're at index 1, it's just going to be editable, which is where we'll add our camera positions. Right now we can see we have nothing, we just have everything zeroed. But if we had camera positions and we flick this over to 0, it's going to start trying to play through that data. We have our camera speed, which for some reason is set very high. Normally I'd put it at something like 0.5, and that's just the speed of an LFO that's going to cycle through all of your camera positions. This is in terms of the smoothing on the filter, which is basically how fast you're smoothing between that data, so how fast you move between things. We also have our positions, and this is what we want to play with. So right now we're going to set some positions for this shape. And when I've got something I kind of like, I'm going to click Add Angle. We can see that this angle has now been added. I'm going to add in some more changes here. Let's kind of rotate around. Add in that. See the back. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And we also have this FOV angle, which we could control. So now I've got these positions that I've set up, and if I flick over to cam play/edit, we should be moving between those positions. This here is how smooth that movement's going to be. So if I just have it down here, it's just going to do a static change. If I move it up, it's going to be a slower change. And if you want something really slow and over time, then you can set that up. But for the base setup that I like, I just have everything at 1. And then if you want to turn up that camera speed, then things will move smoothly but faster. We also have obviously rotation, so this would be if we were editing a rotation parameter, which I'm not going to add right now, but obviously you get the idea of that. You can rotate. And we also have this clear angles button, so if I press this button, it's going to delete all those angles. If I go back in and I add in a few random angles, let's flip them around. And what we'll notice is I am having things sometimes moving in a slightly strange way, and I'll explain that in a minute, because this is the use of a look at component, and I'll show you how to edit that. So I've added in a few things, and let's go back to playing. I might want to delete this default, which is just 0, 0, 0, just my default value at center. So if I want to delete that, I can just press delete 0, and it's going to delete that first index. If I press it again, unless everything is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, it's going to keep your rows. So this allows you to either keep that 0 position or delete it, which is really useful. So yeah, that's the basic use of the component in terms of what we actually are setting up here. The other thing I want to mention is we have this look at section here. So I could actually move this look at component to change what the center of my scene is. And so this can be useful for, if you want to have something that is maybe further away, or for example, if you're working with a larger scene where your actual center isn't quite at 0, 0, 0. So this is something you can set manually, and I can just toggle on and off this render key. For example, if I was working with something like a point cloud, which I'll demo. So if I just do an add and a convert, I can set up some points. I should have done this before. I don't know why I set up half the network and not the rest of the network. Anyway, we've got our geometry, and I'm going to then instance that. So I'm going to say instancing on. I'm going to translate my R, G, and B positions. Okay, so we can see something that's more or less in the center as well. And I'm going to go to my second tab to instance my color, R, G, and B positions. So now we have something that's all kind of set up. I can add a constant. So now we see it is nice and bright. And I'm going to turn off this bust so we can see that in this case, maybe not the best example because the center is more or less the same, but let's kind of turn on that view and move more towards me. And what's a nice thing about a lot of these like kind of 3D capture tools is they will, to an extent, do a pretty good job of approximating the center of an image. But this is why you get some of that sort of weird rotation as you go around. So this can be kind of a cool effect, which I like to use. But you also can just go into the camera control component, which is where we're going to look next, and just take that option off. So right now we have gone inside. So I'm going to press the I key to go inside. You can also double click. And within that camera viewport, we are looking at in this parameter here, right? We're looking at that outside section. So I could just remove what I'm looking at. And we can see that it's going to be a bit more wild in this case because it's a different sort of orientation. So you can obviously set up something in your camera, but it's going to not necessarily look at the center of the scene. So let's kind of go ahead and just clear all those angles. We'll see that if I toggle that position, let's go back to 0, 0, 0, it's going to be a lot more sensitive. And this can be really cool as well. So you could actually set up really interesting kind of camera angles this way. And it's something that maybe if you want something a bit more cinematographic, I can't speak. If you want something a bit more kind of cinematic, not cinematographic, you can set this up and kind of add things in. Also, the rotation is going to be more like working with that camera sort of type in Blender. And once you've maybe got something set up here, you can kind of go in and see what that looks like animated. Maybe I want to go in further, and I'm going to rotate around, and I kind of always just go for messed up. I'm not very good at navigating